think everybody's popping in now. Wanting to make sure everybody's connected to audio. We still have some nice little dots there. Okay. Adelante. So, good morning, buenos días, I'm Alegría. Si ocupan interpretación, tenemos allí abajo en la pantalla un globito que dice interpretación, un globito así, nomás hay que hacer clic y tenemos intérpretes hoy para esta reunión. Everybody got that message? Okay. So I am so happy to be here today with my amazing team equity, folks from Human Services, folks from the Economic Development Board, and all of you as our community partners in this effort to recover equitably from the pandemic. I am going to, can everybody from the county kind of put your hands up and say hi from HSD and EDB and equity? Okay, good. These are all the folks that will be here today to kind of help us guide through what is the NOFA and what we are talking about today. I'm going to pass it on to Chrissy Tweeter from HSD to make sure that we know the rules today as we are in kind of the post-release of the NOFA stage of the process. And then after Chrissy, Michael Bañero, Oscar Chavez from HSD will take it forward.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Tudor, not Tweeter. First day of school was always a lot of fun, as you can imagine. Let's talk about the rules for today. We're going to ask that you hold off on using the chat while we review the NOFA and all of the materials. We'd like you to only use the chat if you're having technical issues. Once we're done reviewing all of the documents with you, we're going to open up the chat for questions. We'd like those to be as succinct as possible. We're going to look them over and make sure we understand what it is you're asking. And then we're going to take away those questions and we're going to review them and answer as many as we can and post those on the NOFA website by the end of the day tomorrow. I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded and we will also post this online where the NOFA is posted as well. Okay. Should we take a look at the NOFA now?
Yes, please, Chrissy Tudor. Thank you. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, so what we're going to do today is kind of move through the NOFA and explain and essentially, you know, translate, interpret county speak in a NOFA into the reality of what you have before you. So I'm going to pass it over to Oscar to speak on this next section here.
Thank you, Alegría. I just want to reiterate that we are incredibly excited about this opportunity and this point in time that we're at. We know that our community is in desperate need of assistance, and in true partnership with our community, we hope to be able to offer some exciting and new approaches for how we can help ensure that our community and those most impacted can recover from the impacts of the pandemic. We know that this funding is intended to prioritize those communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the way in which our community responds in addressing the needs of those who were hardest impacted by the pandemic. We also want to make sure that we can answer, that we can take all of your questions today. And as Christy pointed out, those questions we will respond and make sure that they're posted so that everybody who is here and not here can have access to that information. And we also have placed a considerable amount of focus on an equitable recovery. That was the intent of the legislation. And I'm going to turn it over to Alegría to talk about why this is so incredibly important and how that links to our county strategic plan and pillar and direction, and why we hope to see, and really why we've provided a lot of the information with the portrait of Sonoma and some of the data that really reinforces why we need to target those communities that were hardest hit. So I'll turn it back over to Alegria.
Thanks, Oscar. So Chrissy, if you could slide down into the next little section there, which is a bunch of words that hopefully really gets across, what are the values that are underlying this effort and what we really see in terms of what a successful proposal looks like. So we here, with all of this in the first paragraph, we really want to make sure that folks understand that different people have different needs and that it is a critical function of being a good service provider to be culturally responsive to the people that you serve. So tell us who they are and tell us how your understanding of who they are impact the way that you serve them and in terms of the way that you have designed programs to address the ways in which their identities and the ways in which their identities that intersect impact their typical access to services and how your whether it's your partnership or your design really gets at some of those kind of those hot roots, right? That really get at the root causes of why the outcomes have looked as disproportionately negative for BIPOC communities as they have been throughout this pandemic. The second paragraph there is really recognizing that there's no one organization that will be able to address this challenge on their own. And so we're recognizing here what kind of enhanced impact we can have when we embrace collectivity and collaboration. And so what does it look like and how have your partnerships shaped up to really take into consideration each skill set or geographic focus or language focus or ways in which you're serving particular populations when brought together in a collaborative effort? How does that really kind of get at this attempt to leverage each of these strengths and to come together into something stronger than just one organization by itself? Chrissy, I'm going to let you take the next section here.
Thank you. So the eligible proposers include private for-profit and public or private nonprofit agencies, as well as county departments and other governmental entities. Multiple contracts will be funded. So applicants may choose to deliver services alone. However, in order to adequately address community needs and comply with the federal funding requirements, partnerships are highly encouraged. If multiple agencies apply as a consortium, a single agency must serve as the lead agency and should include in their program budget the cost for this increased oversight, capacity building if applicable, support and coordination, including adequate staffing and operating costs. The lead agency will function as the fiscal agent and as a coordinator of services among agencies, providing oversight, information exchange, and administrative and fiscal support and monitoring. Formal agreements should be established, and a lead agency must demonstrate its capacity to oversee collaborative projects by either showing past success or clearly outlining a plan for oversight. The private, nonprofit, and for-profit organizations that are determined to be subrecipients, and that will be almost everyone here, must be in good standing with the California Secretary of State and are encouraged to register in the federal system for award management. If you're already registered, please confirm that your registration is active. We will need an agency DUNS number for all applicants. If your organization doesn't have a DUNS number, you can go online and get one. According to the website, it should take 1 to 2 business days. So we've estimated that approximately 34.1 million will be available through December 31st, 2024. We have set a minimum award amount at $250,000 for the total grant period. Contracts funded through this NOFA are expected to begin July 1, 2022 and end June 30th, 23, and may be renewed through December 31st, 24, depending on service provider performance. Okay, you can keep going. All right, let's take a look at the schedule. Today's March 3rd, and here we are. So we will take questions ongoing through March 25th, which is a Friday. We are going to publish responses every Friday through April 1st. Listen, sometimes we get a question that stumps us and we need to do some research. And we're gonna move as fast as we can to get those answered, but we're not gonna hold up answers to all of the other questions that we've received. So if you don't see an answer, we'll let you know that we are researching it and we'll get something posted as soon as possible. The applications are due by 2 on April 7th. The review committees will score applications April 11th through the 29th. After those scoring and recommendations are made by the review committees, all applicants will be notified of the outcomes prior to the board meeting to award funds on May 24th. Now you can see we've got to move pretty fast after that. We've got contracts starting July 1. So we do need to comply with the ARPA Act requirements. So Jake, if you wouldn't mind opening up the final rule for just a second. Oh, there it is. Look at that. That was quick. So this is a short 400 and something pages. We have read it for you, but we do want to encourage you, depending on your program activity, your proposed program, you should take a look at this. What are the intentions behind the program activities? So we encourage you to take a look at this document. We also encourage you to look at the compliance and reporting requirements. This document does have a table of contents, which is nice, but it'll lay out what each program activity is required to report as it relates to ARPA. Jake, you can go back then to the NOFA. Okay, so recipients of ARPA funds are subject to the required federal contract provisions. We have provided a sample agreement, and I would like to open this up for just a second, Jake, if you don't mind. Okay. We have worked with County Council to develop a subrecipient agreement for the ARPA funds. Jake, I'm sorry to keep doing this because you scroll down to the ARPA exhibit, which would be probably around page 20 or something. This includes all of the required ARPA provisions. You're almost there. Oh, one more. So I really encourage you to review this. These are the requirements of the funding. I also encourage you to look at the insurance requirements. The sample does include the insurance requirements for services to clients. So potentially that could change, but I'll tell you, I want you to review this now because we do have to move pretty quickly. You should have, be exposed to what it is that you're signing prior to July 1. You should also take a look at the insurance requirements because that's what does hold up our agreements in the end. So it is important that you take a look at all of these. The federal requirements are around monitoring, there are fiscal requirements in there. So I do encourage you to take a look, and if you have questions, shoot them our way. And I think you're up to talk about the program activities.
Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about the Community Resilience Program activities. ARPA funds will be used to address the disproportionate public health and economic impacts of the crisis on the hardest hit communities, populations, and households in Sonoma County. Providers must verify that program participants have been negatively impacted by the COVID-19 public health emergency and fall within one of the eligible beneficiary groups. Verification documentation will be determined during contract negotiations depending on the type of program and beneficiary. As a result of a series of ARPA community engagement efforts, including virtual town halls, community surveys, and convening an ARPA equity work group, The Board of Supervisors has prioritized the funding of specific ARPA eligible activities for the county that address the negative economic impacts and the disparities in public health outcomes as a result of the pandemic. These activities include assistance to households and basic needs, childcare and childcare facilities, educational disparities, community health workers and public benefits navigators, housing and shelter, mental health services, assistance to workers, small businesses and nonprofits, premium pay, and culturally responsive COVID-19 disaster response and long-term recovery. There is specific information on these activities in attachment B, which if you'll give me a moment, I will open up and share. So financial impact for ARPA activities does have to have occurred after the start of the pandemic in March 2020 or after. And do please note that not all activities that were named in the final rule will be prioritized for funding in Sonoma County, and so they have not been included in this description. After I go over some details in the prioritized activities, we'll also review the eligible beneficiaries.
Jay, can I interrupt you for a second? Our interpreter
Yes.
has his hand up.
Go ahead, Juan.
Yes, can you reassign me? I got kicked out of the meeting for whatever reason. So I just rejoined. All of a sudden, my screen went black and I was out.
Annie, you're on mute, but I see you working on that.
Yes, I am working on that right
Yes.
now. One moment.
Thanks
Thank
for letting
you.
us know, Juan.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna pop into the Spanish page and just make sure folks know that he's coming back on and to figure out where he left off, okay? I'll be right back. Las personas que aquí están en el canal de español, ¿dónde dejó Juan de traducir? ¿Todos escucharon bien? Ok, voy a regresar al canal pues el en el cuarto grande. ¿Sí? Gracias. Okay, Juan's back into the Spanish channel.
Okay, and should I go back and repeat anything?
I'm gonna check real quick. ¿Hay algo que tiene que repetir o que aclarar después que Juan regresó? Okay, sale. Jake, if you could go back to the beginning of this page.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to repeat what I've already gone over. I did not read this entire document as most of it is in the NOFA itself. I'm just wanting to highlight that for the ARPA activities, the financial impact has to have occurred after the start of the pandemic in March 2020 or after. And that, well, the final rule has named quite a few more activities than we have in this document. Not every activity was prioritized for funding in Sonoma County, so those have not been included in this description. And then after this, we will review eligible beneficiaries. So activities for households and communities include assistance to households and basic needs. And what you'll see here is that some of these categories have information for impacted households, and some have information for both impacted households and disproportionately impacted households. And when we review attachment C, we will see what the criteria for those for impacted versus disproportionately impacted households and communities is. I'm not going to go over every bullet point in this attachment, but I will highlight some things that should be pointed out. So as I said, households and communities covers assistance to households and basic needs. It covers childcare and childcare facilities. Under disproportionately impacted households and communities in childcare facilities, I do want to point out that if you are interested in investing in communities, in neighborhoods through the vacant and abandoned properties, you should read footnote 1 here. There's a lot of information about what that means and what applies. And you will see that in a few sections, there's eligibility for vacant and abandoned properties. So please do read that footnote carefully. Educational disparities, I will point out that if you are interested in providing services for internet access or digital literacy assistance for students, please do read the footnotes about what is eligible. And I will read one footnote to you around addressing the impacts of lost instructional time. When providing services to address lost instructional time, recipients may presume that any kindergarten through 12th grade student who lost access to in-person instruction for a significant period of time has been impacted by the pandemic and is thus eligible for responsive services. If a student had to do any learning from home during the pandemic, they're eligible for a service that will address the impacts of that lost instructional time. You do not need to have any further proof of impact. And then I will also point out here under educational disparities, disproportionately impacted households. You will see, let's see, right here, mental health needs. For this specifically, mental health needs, if there's any behavioral health services or mental health services being provided, it is presumed that the general public was impacted by the pandemic and providing behavioral health services to members of the general public, including children and youth in school. Just being a human makes you eligible for mental health services, whether in school or outside of school. For community health workers and public benefits navigators, in our community, we have public benefits navigators like promotores. Those are who are eligible, as well as other types of community health workers and public benefits navigators. Impacted households are eligible for assistance in accessing or applying for public benefits and services, while disproportionately impacted households are, as well as being eligible for that, are also eligible to address health disparities. Housing and shelter, that includes emergency housing assistance, and it can include promoting long-term housing security. I will point out under housing and shelter, disproportionately impacted communities are eligible again for that vacant and abandoned property, where you really should read the rules around that in the footnotes. And for additional information on that, I would suggest reading the final rule, because there's a lot of detail in there about what is and is not eligible when rehabbing vacant or abandoned properties. For mental health services, as I had said before, the general public is eligible for mental health services, and there is a lot that is included in that. And we have assistance to workers. And then we move on to the category of small businesses and nonprofits. And we have it split up here. The first section covers small businesses and the second section covers nonprofits. Impacted small businesses are eligible for things like grants and technical assistance and providing job training. And then disproportionately impacted small businesses, while eligible for everything above, are also eligible for things like certain capital investments And again, that vacant and abandoned property. And then nonprofits. And this, I would like to point out that this is, we're not providing grants specifically to individual nonprofits through this NOFA. This would be if you were providing services to nonprofits. So you could provide a service of providing direct assistance to nonprofits. And then disproportionately impacted nonprofits are also eligible, again, for rehabbing vacant and abandoned properties. And then there's premium pay. The county is seeking an organization or agency to oversee distribution of premium pay. Premium pay will not be distributed to individual organizations or agencies through this NOFA. And premium pay is defined as up to $13 an hour paid to an eligible worker, not to exceed $25,000 over the period of performance. And eligible workers means workers who are needed to maintain continuity of operations of essential critical infrastructure sectors, and those are listed in here. Essential work has its own definitions, which are also in here. Then our last category is culturally responsive COVID-19 disaster response and long-term recovery. Disproportionately impacted households are eligible for services that mitigate COVID-19. And then county departments, businesses, and nonprofits are able to use ARPA funds for improvements to or construction of emergency operations centers and acquisition of emergency response equipment, and the costs of establishing public health data systems, including technology infrastructure. Just give me a moment so I can switch screens. We'll go back to the NOFA. Now we will, actually, let me go back to this last section here. So you can access the ARPA Equity Workgroup Summary of Community Needs on the Upstream Investments website on the ARPA page, which I will share. And this is the page where all of the NOFA documents are. Down here, this is the page where we will be posting the answers to the questions and answers. This is where the recording of this workshop will be. And then any findings related to the impacts of the pandemic on the local economy can be found on the Economic Development Board's website, which is here, and there are multiple reports on here that you can download to see the impact on industries and organizations in our county because of COVID. Okay, so adversely impacted populations. The community needs assessment that I referred to before, which is on the ARPA website, revealed the following socially and economically underrepresented and or historically excluded populations have been hit hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic in Sonoma County. In accordance with ARPA guidelines, proposers are encouraged to describe how their programs will help eliminate or reduce disparities experienced by adversely impacted populations, including, but not limited to, essential workers, including farm workers, BIPOC students, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, BIPOC-owned businesses and nonprofit organizations, high school students who graduated during virtual learning, and populations with the highest rates of COVID in Sonoma County by race ethnicity, including but not limited to Hispanic Latino populations, American Indian Alaska Native populations, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander populations, Black and African American populations. And so now I'm going to share with you attachment C and go over the eligible beneficiaries. Just give me one moment. So this is who is eligible for services by your organization that has a grant. This is not who is eligible to apply. This is not proposers. Chrissy went over who is eligible to propose earlier. So these are the beneficiaries eligible for services as determined by the ARPA final rule. This document defines what is meant by impacted and what is meant by disproportionately impacted households and communities. Impacted households include low and moderate income households and communities, while disproportionately impact households and communities include just low income households and communities. And I want to refer you to the footnotes for more information on what qualifies as low income versus moderate income. Impacted households are households that experience increased food or housing insecurity, and that is also defined in the footnotes. Households that qualify for specific programs are considered impacted. And then if you're providing affordable housing programs, households that qualify for the National Housing Trust Fund and Home Investment Partnerships Program are considered impacted. And I'll point out here again that if you're providing services to address lost instructional time in K through 12 schools, any student that lost access to in-person instruction is considered impacted. The disproportionately impacted households, households that are in qualified census tracts are considered disproportionately impacted. And I will share later on attachment D, which highlights those census tracts on a map and in a list. And then households that qualify for certain federal benefits are also considered disproportionately impacted, as well as households receiving services provided by tribal governments. This document has a definition of who is considered an unemployed or underemployed worker. And here I'll point out again, for the general public, if you're providing behavioral health services, everyone is considered eligible based on the impact of the pandemic for mental health services. On here, you'll see that a small business is defined as a business that has no more than 500 employees. A micro business is defined as a small business that has 5 or fewer employees, one or more of whom owns that business. And then you can see the difference in what an impacted small business and a disproportionately impacted small business is. Any business that operates in a qualified census tract is considered disproportionately impacted, and any business that operates that is operated by tribal governments or on tribal lands is considered disproportionately impacted. And then nonprofits is defined as a 501c3 or 501c19. And it's the same qualifications for small businesses is for nonprofits. The differences between impacted and disproportionately impacted. And then Title I eligible schools are schools that are eligible to receive services under specific sections of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. And then for services that address educational disparities, Title I eligible schools are recognized as disproportionately impacted, and any responsive services that support the school generally or support the whole school are eligible. And then Again, the qualified census tracts. The legislation defines households, small businesses, and nonprofits that are located in HUD qualified census tracts as having been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Sonoma County has further defined those areas and brought in data from the Human Development Index scores that were revealed in the Portrait of Sonoma County 2021 update and COVID-19 case data for Sonoma County, just related to the disproportionate impact of COVID on specific populations. And I will just quickly share with you the page for the Portrait of Sonoma, which is linked in the NOFA, and then the COVID-19 case data for Sonoma County as well. And my final share with you will be the census tract data. And so this is attachment D. It is a map of the qualified census tracts. This includes the HUD qualified census tracts and the additional census tracts determined by Human Development Index scores and COVID case data. And there's a list of those census tracts on the side. And then finally, at the bottom of this page is a link where you can put in the address of a home or business to determine what census tract it is in. And that is right here. And I'm going to hand it over to Kelly now to talk about performance and reporting requirements.
Good morning, everyone. So we will have two areas of performance and reporting requirements related to the ARPA funds. One focused on results-based accountability and one area focused on ARPA-specific reporting. So I think many people are aware our county has prioritized using results-based accountability as an approach to monitor the impact of investments made by the County of Sonoma. Selected recipients will partner with the county to develop a results-based accountability plan to show how the proposed program project will be structured to achieve agreed upon outcomes, including measurement of how beneficiaries are better off as a result of the proposed program or project. In addition, we are using and will be implementing anti-racist RBA, and the contractor will apply, document, and report quarterly on performance measures and activities, including demographic data detailed in the RBA plan. And these reports will be submitted in an electronic format to be determined. And I just want to reiterate that the RBA plan is not a part of the NOFA application, and this will be developed in partnership between the awardees once the contract is executed and the county departments. And if you are interested and or maybe you have already attended some of our trainings, Upstream Investments does offer ongoing results-based accountability trainings. We just finished a series this week. We will be adding additional dates to our website. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can participate in those trainings around RBA, please visit our website. And that is the specifics on the results-based accountability piece of the NOFA. And I will turn it over to Amanda to talk about the ARPA-specific reporting.
Okay, as Kelly just mentioned, in addition to the results-based accountability, additional ARPA-specific reporting will be required. And this is including, but not limited to, monthly fiscal claims that will contain information regarding project status and demographic distribution. These reports will be submitted in an electronic format to be determined. Additional information regarding the ARPA reporting requirements can be found in the linked compliance and reporting guidance. And this is the same guidance that Chrissy reviewed earlier. Thank you, Jake. Okay, now I will pass it back to Chrissy.
Okay, back to the NOFA. Technical Assistance Workshop. Well, you were all strongly encouraged to attend, and here you are. Take a look at the written questions section. So all questions related to the services listed in the NOFA should be submitted via email to arpa@sonomacounty.org. And that's through the due date indicated in the schedule. If you would please include NOFA question in your subject line. We are in a formal procurement period now, so please realize that questions will not be accepted by phone, and applicants should not contact any county staff for additional information during this period. Like, it's very uncomfortable as a staff person to receive a question or for someone to reach out via phone or email. Those will be referred directly to the ARPA team. Answers will be posted every Friday. As for the application submittal, one copy of the application form must be submitted per proposed program, and that's via email to the same email address. Please include NOFA application in the subject line of your email. So, the application review and funding recommendations. The review committee will consist of neutral parties who will score and make funding recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. When applications are being scored and funding recommendations are being made, the review committee can only base their scoring and subsequent recommendations on the information contained in the applications. Jake, could you scroll down to the evaluation and scoring section? So a proposal evaluation system, including a point system, will ensure uniformity in evaluating the proposals and will identify the rationale for the funding recommendations. Each application will be evaluated within the criteria identified here. Program design and approach, 60 points plus 10 additional bonus points. Organizational capacity, 15 points. Fiscal qualifications and budget, 25 points. We're going to take a look at the application and you'll see the breakdown per response. The forms and attachments, the only thing that you need to submit is your program application, one per program. And that's on the NOFA page. The attachments that Jake went over are also on the NOFA page. And I think now Alegria is going to walk you through the application.
Thank you. Okay, so program or project activity, there's a drop down there. Click in and pull it down. As Chrissy said, for each program project activity, there's a different application. So it's okay to kind of have these be repetitive as long as they are making some distinctions between the kinds of program or projects that they're doing. Next, click down here. So basic information about your agency, right, this is a process that's including county departments and in this application process as well. So agency and or county department. Question here is this, just the lead organization at the top of this application process? The answer is yes, it's the lead application here. You're asked to identify the organization type. And then the funding amount requested, the number of people that you imagine being served by this, and identifying the kinds of beneficiaries. Like, so is it households and communities? Is it unemployed and underemployed workers? Is it the general public? Is it small businesses, nonprofits, Title I eligible schools? Question here, Jake, is there an opportunity to click more of these? One or more than one of these beneficiary clicks? Yes, there is. Good. Thank you. In this section down here, the 150 words per list, this is the description of the services to be provided. This is essentially the kind of summary of your project to all the stakeholders involved. And this will be used to describe your application and what it is that you're going to get up to here. And then at the bottom here, this is a certification, basic certification for what it is that you've presented here in this proposal. And then we're going into a little bit more of the narrative section. Please recognize that there is a total of 12 pages, and anything after 12 pages will not be reviewed. So keep it to 12. And again, because there's an opportunity to provide different applications for each program or project activity, you can get into more detail if you're submitting more than one application. So this is also kind of connected to the ways in which we're evaluating your project or program. So the point system attached to each of these outcomes or these requirements here in the application is listed to the right at the end of the kind of each numbered requirement. So the first here is to identify 2 to 3 outcomes. The second is to do a more detailed description of the structure of the program or project, including the design, the activities, and any kind of emerging or promising or evidence-based practices that will be used in administering the program. The third section here is a description of the impact that the pandemic has had on the population that you're proposing to serve and how the program is meant to address the impact. The fourth here is how is this project or program an eligible use of ARPA funds as described in attachment B. Number 5 here is how does this facilitate long-term recovery, right? How is this distinct from an emergency response? How does this really look at the time frame for ARPA funding? Number 6 is what is your approach to equity here? How are you providing equitable services? How are you intending to promote equitable outcomes? Are there particular folks that are of focus in your program or project? Number 7 is please describe how you intend to partner with or subcontract with partners to ensure that you are able to have that collective impact that we described at the beginning of the NOFA. Please describe with some particularity, what each piece, each partner will take up and how assignments will continue to be made throughout the course of the project. Number 8 is around outreach to prioritize beneficiaries. And I think that's distinct from engagement. So if there's a distinction here that you need to make, there's some space there. Number 9, qualified census tracts. Will services be directed to beneficiaries residing in or operating in qualified census tracts? And then the second section here, B, is about how. How will you kind of direct and focus those services? Going now into organizational capacity. This is related to the lead agency's role here. So please describe how the lead agency will comply with data reporting and performance requirements. How will your policies and procedures allow you to ensure that we have intake information to verify eligibility, ensure completeness and accuracy, and maintain privacy and confidentiality of records? This is especially important as folks are working together in collaborations. How are you also intending on protecting the information of your clients? What's your on-ramp? How quickly can you get the program up and what will you do to do so? And 3, what does it look like to continue the work that you are intending on doing under ARPA once ARPA money is expended? Down to fiscal qualifications and budget. Would like to know a little bit about the experience of the lead agency in administering federal funds. And if you could, in particular, if you have it, please describe your experience acting as the lead fiscal agent in administering federal funds. Section 2 here is about description of costs in the budget. What is the plan to expend all funds by the end of 2024? And if there are any matching funds, any in-kind contributions, any additional ways of leveraging additional funds, please describe that here as well. Section 3 is a very basic budget. If you are awarded a contract, a more detailed budget will be required. And again, here, if you are acting as a lead agency in a collaborative application, please make sure that you describe and consider the administrative and additional staffing and operating costs to play that role, right? To play that sponsorship role. And so we're going down and looking at staff salaries and benefits, operating costs, subcontractor costs, stuff that's going directly to clients, and any indirect costs. So what is the total cost and what is the cost per beneficiary? How are we breaking that down and understanding that? Couple of asterisks here. We have made some adjustments to this NOFA, hearing what you said to us about how important it is to have an opportunity to have advance payments be sitting in your coffers before you try to get that money out to the client community. So please know that this is an opportunity to request those advance payments. And then the second asterisk here is if there are any indirect costs over 10%, we have to have an approved indirect cost rate plan approved by a federal agency provided at the time of contracting. Number 4 here is a question that will really help us. It's not scored, but it's to understand what is the minimum award amount needed. We imagine that there will be more requests for funding than there is funding. And so this will really help us to understand what the minimum is needed in order to get the project off the ground. I'm going to pass it back to Jake, Chrissy.
I will say thank you to everyone. I'm trying to speak slower. Now we're going to go ahead and open up the chat for your questions. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. Go ahead and get them in there. We will cut and paste those with our answers right into the Q&A document on the NOFA website. So have at it.